If there's one lever that can really change the trajectory of your business, it's expansion revenue. In fact, 70 to 80% of revenue per customer typically comes after the initial sale. But HubSpot sales tools are really only focused on helping you close new customers. So I wanted to start thinking about how I could use my deals to manage and track expansion revenue. And that's what we're going to get into in this video. Let's check it out. So here we have the end state of what we're going to look at today, which is our revenue dashboard with closed revenue by type. You can see if I hover over any of these bars, you can see that for each month, we're breaking down the revenue and whether it was initial sale revenue, renewal revenue, or upsell or expansion revenue. And then we're also tracking the total ARR that we have across all of our accounts in the line. We're going to get into the graph in just a moment, but first let's talk about where can you manage or where should you manage expansion revenue in your HubSpot account. If I go over here to deals, you likely already have a sales pipeline where you're managing your new revenue. So you might have some stages in there that move a prospect all the way from their first meeting all the way to closed one. And maybe you have a renewal pipeline where you're managing the recurring revenue, which is associated with accounts, their end of year renewals if they're on an annual billing cycle. And you could choose to manage your expansion revenue in either of those places, or you could choose to use an entirely separate pipeline exclusively for new business opportunities that come after the initial sale. But the most important thing is that we're able to distinguish between our different revenue types in the pipeline. So you'll notice here we have renewal tags, we have upsell tags, and if we go through some of our close one deals, we also have expansion and contraction tags in here as well. So let's talk about how we can visually identify what the type of revenue is and add a tag in our pipeline. If I go over here to edit stages, we can go in and customize our deal tags. You'll see here all of the ones that are being broken out in the pipeline are visible here. So we have upsell, contraction, expansion. If I click in to edit any of these, we'll see how those are put together. So we have the name, the description, the color, specific pipelines that we're looking at to add this tag, and then the filters that we're using in order to add that at the right time to the right deal. What I'm going to call out here is that we're using deal type and we're extending deal type beyond the default HubSpot property, which just includes new business and existing business, to include the specific types of revenue that we want to track. For every deal that we're closing and winning, we want to make sure that we're adding the appropriate deal type so that when we go into our revenue dashboard, we are able to break it out. So let's look at how this report is built. So if I go to customize, you'll see that we are using a combination type graph. On the x-axis, we have close date. On the y-axis, we have the sum of the amounts, so deal amounts totaled. Then in the y-axis 2, which is the line in this graph, we have actually the same field here, sum amount, but we just renamed it to be total ARR so that when you hover over it, it is distinguished from the deal types and the revenue associated with those deal types. We're then going to break down by that property that we just talked about, deal type. You'll notice here that there are a couple of things that I'm doing in the chart settings, which are important. In y-axis 1, we're using the logarithmic scale. You can choose to use a linear scale here too, but I find that as you have cumulative revenue in the line, you'll end up with a kind of odd looking graph because the line will be a long way above the bars and you have a lot of white space in there. Then on y-axis number 2, just as I mentioned, that is going to be cumulative because that's going to be total ARR that is being closed won over time. And we're going to use the linear scale there for that one. Beyond that, you can change the coloring, you can change the colors associated with specific types. And importantly, we just want to make sure that we're filtering to the pipelines that we care about if there are any pipelines that do not have revenue associated with them that we want to track. For example, we might have a partners pipeline or something like that, and we maybe don't want to pull revenue associated with those deals because it is not actually customer ARR. And finally, we want to make sure that we're filtering to all closed won deals in those pipelines because we don't want to be accounting for revenue here, which is not actually closed revenue. It might be in an earlier stage in that pipeline. So if we go back to the dashboard, this is a great way to break down the revenue that we're winning each month and where it's coming from. You'll notice over time, generally, if you're in a recurring revenue business, that the proportion of revenue that is coming from an initial sale starts to decrease as you have more customers renewing, more upsell and expansion opportunities. And this is a great way to give visibility into what's actually happening and keep track of everything all in HubSpot. If you enjoyed this video and you're looking to track recurring and renewal revenue beyond the point of initial sale and include your expansions in that, we also have this great video over here about how to automate and build a renewal pipeline in HubSpot and automate a lot of the steps there to make that process much smoother and allow your team to focus on providing value and delivering the outcomes that customers are ultimately going to need for them to renew and expand. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.